get our nightclub tape with freestyle disco and slow dancing. You can dance. We guarantee it. But you have to take the first step.
You Can Dance videos are now specially priced at just $29.95 each. Choose Jitterbug, Foxtrot, Mambo, Tango, or Nightclub. Order now and get free a special practice music audio tape, a $10 value. To order, call now 1-800-634-3500. Use your major credit card. Sorry, no CODs. Call now 1-800-634-3500.
Tomorrow on A&E. At 8, soldiers on both sides recall World War II on Battle Line. Then at 8:30, Walter Cronkite takes us on a walk through the 20th century. At 9, Wings Over the World takes to the airwaves with a salute to French aviation. Then at 10, the Jonestown suicides and the Nazi march in Skokie in 1978 on Decades the 70s. And at 11, Wise Guys Ray Sharkey headlines A&E's An Evening at the Improv. Tomorrow on A&E.
The A&E Cable Network is proud to present this series of profiles and chronicles assembled from our archives, which takes us through a gallery of extraordinary lives, lives that travel across the vast landscape of the 20th century. From old New York to Casablanca, from the Russian Revolution to rock and roll. My name is Peter Graves, and this is Biography.
This program is brought to you in part by Dodge Cars and Trucks. On the street or off the road, it's the new spirit of performance. It's the new spirit of Dodge.
The world-class value of Dodge Dynasty. Choreographed for the road. Accompanied by fuel-injected V6 power. And 6 of the best seats in the house. The 1989 Dynasty, the new spirit of classic performance, only from Dodge.
This is one of 570 million refund locations for American Express traveler's checks. Now, anywhere you can find a phone, you can get a refund. Hand delivered anywhere you want, virtually anywhere in the world. But remember, this new service comes only from American Express traveler's checks. So if your bank doesn't carry them, go to one that does. Don't leave home without them.
Caring. It's a special kind of love, of patience and working together. Teachers care. It's understanding, a feeling. Policemen care. And so do we at Mutual of America. We specialize in pension and savings plans for people in not-for-profit organizations. Caring now and for security in the years ahead. Mutual of America, caring for Americans who care for us all.
We interrupt this program to bring a special bulletin sponsored by Surf Detergent. Rock Rennet, what's it like out there?
So hot that that is sweating buckets. Mom, what do you think of the situation?
Some smell has created the sock monster, and it's raining stinky socks everywhere. Our lab technicians may have found clues to the cause of this smell. A most disgusting specimen. Can Surf save the critic family? Dirty clothes go in. Clean clothes come out. Surf got out the odors. Now we can breathe easier. Hope you like our commercial.
The dawn broke crisp and clear in the eastern sky. The planes came from the north over the island of Oahu. The first bomb hit shortly before 8 a.m. It was the morning of December 7th, 1941. What followed was a nightmare. 353 Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes pummeled Pearl Harbor for nearly 2 hours. Almost 2,000 Americans were dead, 2,000 wounded. The American fleet in the Pacific was crippled and sinking. And the message radioed to the Japanese task force was Tora, Tora, Tora. The code words meaning surprise had been achieved. The architect of the sneak attack and spearhead of the Japanese war machine was Isoroku Yamamoto, commander-in-chief of the Japanese Navy in World War II. Our biography of Yamamoto was made as a joint venture by the BBC and Time Life. It was filmed on location in America, Japan, and the Solomon Islands. It contains unique archival footage concerning key episodes in Yamamoto's life, and it provides a rare and revealing glimpse of Japanese life as it existed in the early part of this century. Yamamoto was a complex man. He was short of stature, earthy, sentimental. He had spent time in America before the war and greatly admired the country which he swore to destroy. A true samurai warrior, he considered himself beyond all things the sword of his emperor. But of all the events of Yamamoto's life, the event that hangs over his biography like a cloud against the sun took place on that most infamous day in American history. And now the story of Isoroku Yamamoto, Grand Admiral, Imperial Navy of Japan.
Yeah! Around 10 a.m. on the 7th of December 1941, the last Japanese aircraft returned to their carriers from their strike on Pearl Harbor. Behind them, American sea power in the Pacific lay like a giant with a broken back. The Japanese had struck, without declaration of war, at a base sleepy with a peacetime Sunday morning's routine. Of the 8 battleships in Pearl Harbor, 4 had been sunk outright, 3 critically damaged. Japan had won a victory without precedent. To indignant Americans, it was the commander-in-chief of the Japanese fleet who figured as the arch-villain. But the real man was very different from the wartime caricature, and in curiously unexpected ways. Itajima Naval College, where Yamamoto was trained as an officer. Yamamoto joined the Navy in 1901 because, in his own words, it was his great desire to become a warrior. It was a new Navy, created in the previous 30 years. Japan had looked to the Royal Navy as a model, to British advisors, to the Nelson tradition of bold attack. But there wasn't much that was made in England about Yamamoto's childhood. For Japan was adopting Western technology, not Western ideas. She meant her children to remain true guardians of her own ancient culture. Isoroku Yamamoto was the youngest son of an old but fallen samurai family. He was given the name Isoroku, meaning 56, because when he was born in 1884, his father was 56 years old. When he was at school, his family couldn't afford to buy his textbooks, so instead Yamamoto made his own copies of them by hand. This was the Japan Yamamoto grew up in. It was a way of life preserved without change for centuries. Each man had his proper place in the hierarchy, from the poorest peasant all the way up to the emperor at the top. Each bowed in loyalty to those above him. The boy Yamamoto was brought up to believe that the highest duty for a Japanese was obedience to the emperor. For the emperor was a god, descended from the goddess of the sun. The 110,000 shrines of the state religion Shinto celebrated this convenient theme. Yet, during Yamamoto's youth, Japan was becoming a great industrial power. As well as Shinto festivals, steelworks and shipyards. In 1904, Yamamoto graduated from Itajima Naval College, a new officer in a new navy. At Itajima, such traditional exercises as kendo had completed Yamamoto's teaching in the code of the samurai, the warrior. It was a code of blood and honor, glorifying death in battle, which the knights of medieval Europe would have understood. Within months, Yamamoto was fighting for his country against Russia. His mother sent him off with a specially made handkerchief. On it, his father had inscribed,
"Please fall for the emperor and your country. Even when the flower of the warrior falls, it still has a beautiful fragrance."
In 1905, Yamamoto served as an ensign at the Battle of Tsushima. Only 40 years earlier, Japan had had only wooden sailing junks. Now she defeated and destroyed the fleet of Russia, a great European power, a fateful success for herself and the world. Yamamoto was himself badly wounded, losing 2 fingers from his left hand. 3 and his career in the Navy would have been over. Always he was to be conscious of this maimed hand. In the Great War, Japan was Britain's ally, but she cherished ambitions to become a great imperial power, like European states. Already her policy towards China was beginning to cause tension with the West. In 1918, Yamamoto married. Little romance here.
I have decided to marry her for many reasons, among which is that she seems sturdy and healthy, and I believe she will be able to stand up to a lot of hardship.
Next year, at the age of 35, he was off to America to learn English. Boston, Harvard University, industry. What he saw made an immense impact on him. He liked and admired America, the open-mindedness, the pioneering spirit. But above all, he was overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of her industrial power. In later years, he was to say,
"Because I have seen the oil fields of Texas and the motor car industry in Detroit, I know Japan doesn't stand a chance if she goes to war with America or if she starts to compete in building warships."
The lake at Kazimagura, northeast of Tokyo, once serene as a watercolor. Here in 1923, Yamamoto was posted as executive officer of the Naval Air Training Station. It was a key episode in his career, for he had already come to believe that in the future, sea battles would be decided by air power instead of the big gun. Yamamoto set out to convince his pilots that flying was a serious and highly technical profession, not a kind of sport. And at 40, he himself learned to fly. Turao Kuwabara, an old comrade, served with him at this time.
He had an extraordinary sense of sorrow over those who died in accidents during flight training. He felt it far more than most people. As soon as Yamamoto got up in the morning, he went first of all to the shrine to pray, to remember those who had died.
Years later, when commanding an aircraft carrier squadron, he was to tell visitors watching a dive bombing exercise,
"I hope you won't look on this as just a show. Every time they dive, they bleed in their lungs and shorten their lives. It makes me feel terrible that I have to make them go through such a training. But I have no choice but to do it for my country."
In 1925, Yamamoto left Kazimagura for America again, this time as naval attaché. He was to spend a fifth of his career out of Japan. It was a time of détente between America and Japan, thanks to a treaty signed in Washington in 1922. Yamamoto's own admiration for America and American ideals grew deeper. To a colleague, he recommended a biography of Lincoln as a humble man who had fought for freedom all his life. But Japan's ambitions were only sleeping. Her armed forces trained hard and waited. After 1931, with the Emperor Hirohito's acquiescence, Japan resumed a policy of imperial expansion. She seized Manchuria. Hirohito's government wished to end the Washington Treaty, which limited her to 9 battleships against 15 each for Britain and America. Japan would be second to no one. It fell to Yamamoto, now a vice admiral, to voice Japan's demands as her chief navy representative at the London Naval Conference in 1934. A samurai on the steps of number 10 Downing Street, it was an awkward and ambiguous role for a man of his international outlook. Failure to reach agreement at the London conference left Yamamoto disappointed and disillusioned. He thought of retiring.
When I resign from the Navy, I'm going to Monte Carlo to become a gambler.
He was only half joking. Japanese chess was another example of his obsession with gaming. Juji Enomoto, his private secretary during the 30s, noted another facet of Yamamoto's character.
Kind. He was very kind. And he always kept his promises. He was also a very methodical person, very scrupulous. He had somewhat overbearing features and made a strong impression on meeting, which you didn't easily forget. He was quite unusual, not like other people.
In 1936, Enomoto was to see his chief become Vice Minister of the Navy at the age of 52, a member now of Japan's policy-making machine. But Yamamoto's home life was not so successful. Though he was deeply fond of his 4 children, his relationship with his wife had grown cool. His eldest son, Yoshimasa, remembers him as a father.
As much as possible, he tried not to bring his work into his home life. At home, he would study and would ponder over his thoughts. He was very strict with himself, his own conduct. In educating us children, he felt that he should first discipline himself and then let the children see him as he was. Even when we went for walks, we would just walk side by side in silence. He was usually a man of few words.
One of Yamamoto's friends was a Buddhist monk, Zengen Hashimoto.
I met the Admiral in the spring of 1934. At that time, he was already accustomed and disciplined to a form of religious meditation. When I met him and used then to talk with him, I felt that he exposed everything that was in his mind. Things that were ugly as well as good. He hid nothing. And it was as though he was saying, if you want it, you can take everything. There is nothing I have to hide.
In 1937, Japan invaded China. Yamamoto had opposed such aggression. Furious, he told friends,
"The stupid army has started again. It makes me so angry that I'm going to give up smoking until this business is cleared up. But once it is cleared up, I'm going to smoke so much that smoke will come out of my other end."
Japan's Chinese conquests led to ever sharper tensions with America and Britain, so her leaders looked to the kindred spirits of European fascism. Yamamoto warned against the danger he foresaw.
The start of a war with America would be the worst disaster Japan could plunge into. Both Japan and America should do everything in their power to avert a clash. And as for Japan, she should not conclude an alliance with Germany. At that time, he was asked by various people about the Japanese spirit, whether he thought this spirit was invincible, with no equal in the world. He would say, "Japan has the Japanese spirit, but don't forget America has a wonderful American spirit, and Britain has a wonderful British spirit." It was Lindbergh who made the first crossing of the Atlantic by aeroplane. It is dangerous to rely on some superficial Japanese spirit. He often warned of this, and his warnings were not very welcome to the right-wing groups at that time. He was often accused of being too friendly towards America and Britain. He was very much hated by the right-wing groups. They called Yamamoto a coward, a military man, but a coward. A coward because he had thought of avoiding war. He was very much misunderstood. And when things became very tense, some people went so far as to say, in Japan, a man like Yamamoto must be done away with.
By May 1939, Yamamoto so expected assassination that he wrote his testament.
It is easy to die like a warrior on the battlefield, but very difficult to die for a principle. The grace of the emperor is very great, and Japanese history as long as eternity. I cannot but help think about Japan's future. My personal honor, life or death, is of no concern.
In August 1939, Yamamoto was made Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, sent to sea partly to preserve his life.
I am pleased to be in command of such a fleet. At the same time, I realize the greatness of my responsibility. I feel I am completely cut off from the outside world and can devote myself to my work for the Navy.
Tokyo, September 1940. With France defeated and Britain beleaguered, Japan had signed an alliance with the apparent victors, Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Yamamoto's efforts had failed.
I feel that what the Japanese government is doing is quite irrational. Japan is being very foolish, as she will be shocked to find what America can do to threaten her economically. What Japan is doing now is like a child at primary school, acting on impulse.
The 2600th anniversary of the imperial dynasty, more nationalist emotion. Yamamoto thought again of retiring.
It's 36 years since I joined the Navy. Out of the 200 who graduated with me from the Naval Academy, only 4 remain on active service. So this autumn, I shall probably retire, and then I'll return to my house in Nagao.